How surprised do you think Kyle Shanahan was by Purdy? And when do you think, Matt, you've had a chance to talk to him, off mic and that kind of thing. When do you think he first realized this kid's special? Like, he's not just like, you know what? This guy's, better than Sudfeld, but this guy's actually has a lot of real talent. Do you think it wasn't until he played, or do you think it was at some point in the OTAs in the training camp, or was it the Miami game when the rest of us kind of saw what he could do?
I think it was before that. I think it certainly wasn't draft night. I remember talking to Kyle right after the draft, and even Kyle on the record, was like talking about, hey, this guy's Nick Mullins. And which isn't a bad thing, because Nick Mullins has been in the NFL for a few years now, and he's considered a decent backup. And if you can get a decent backup quarterback at pick 262, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't know exactly when it kicked in for Kyle that this guy is a keeper. I think that over time, now, in training camp, even off-season program, training camp, he didn't get a whole lot of reps.
No.
So it was Trey Lance, it was Nate Sudfeld, and then we didn't really see much at all from Brock Purdy. But behind the scenes, you started hearing things about how they really liked Purdy and thought that he had a lot of upside. And it wasn't until late in training camp that I, started to kind of gather that, he's past Sudfeld on the depth chart, and that they might actually keep him over Sudfeld. Because remember, when they signed Sudfeld to that contract, they gave him, I think it was $2 million guaranteed.
Right.
So that showed everybody that the 49ers fully intended to have Nate Sudfeld as their backup quarterback. But it wasn't until much later. So I do know, I've heard the stories, and Kyle told the story about how, he told Jed York, like, hey, this third quarterback, this Brock Purdy kid's pretty good. And then when Brock Purdy, when Trey Lance got injured, Garoppolo got injured, Jed York came to Kyle and said, hey, we're going to be all right. Correct? Because you said that Brock Purdy's pretty good. And Kyle's like, pump the brakes here a little bit. Let's
right.
Too carried away with it. But he played so well in just the sense that he made it look easy. A lot of quarterbacks, even like the layups don't, they might complete the passes, but oftentimes it doesn't look easy. And Brock Purdy just made it look easy last year, and I think he did exactly what Kyle Shanahan drew up. And so he thinks it's sustainable. That's the reason that Brock Purdy is the presumptive starter. And that's the reason that if Brock Purdy's healthy, I don't see anybody else being the starter to open the season.
It really struck me, Matt, going into the locker room that Tuesday after the Miami game, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, the one thing, the PR staff can have a message and the team can have a message, but when the doors open to the locker room, we're going to get a glimpse into how this team feels about themselves, knowing that Jimmy's out for the year most likely, and that they're going to have to go the rest of the way with this 7th round rookie. And I wanted to kind of get a feel for it that day. So I wanted to talk to as many guys as I possibly could. And man, I walked out of that room and I was just like, wow, the vibe was optimistic. Guys were bouncing around. It was like nothing had changed. So the players at some point before that Miami game or that day against Miami, somewhere along that line from training camp to that point, they had decided in their head that Brock Purdy could do the job.
Yeah.
Because you were in that room that day, and we all were kind of on the lookout for, is the vibe going to change? And the vibe didn't change. And the players said all the right things. Hey, we still feel like we got a shot. We believe in this kid. But it was believable. It wasn't like they were saying something that we were sitting there going, yeah, you're just saying that. It felt like they believed it. And sure enough, they had, game recognizes game in that, that old statement. they recognized Brock's ability early on, probably well before the public did.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Jimmy got injured, and we all knew that it was going to be almost immediately. We knew it was going to be a long-term injury, and you kind of got the sense that, oh, how are the guys going to feel? They're going to be upset, or they're going to be disappointed for Garoppolo, but also they're going to be upset for themselves because there goes their opportunity. But you're right, Larry. I never got that sense that everybody was just like, oh, pack it in, it's over. Now, they were saying the right things and it was believable, but, the skeptic in us was like, I don't know. And, he played well against Miami, and then he played well against Tampa Bay, and then the 49ers go up to Seattle and they win the division. And so it was almost like, when are we going to see why this guy was picked 262? There has to be a reason, right?
Right.
And is it going to be, a team with a long week to prepare? Like they can poke the holes in him and they can exploit some things. And we just never saw that. And now I guess the skeptic in me goes, okay, now teams have a full off season. The Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at Brock Purdy, and the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams and the Cardinals, the teams in the division, they're looking at, okay, let's dissect everything this guy does and what can we take away. And that's generally, we've seen quarterbacks get off to great starts, 2-3 games, and then the league catches up to them. And I guess, the skeptic says, well, let's see if he can do it, the second time around. But in talking to Kyle Shanahan and talking to John Lynch, they think that what he did, it wasn't smoke and mirrors. It wasn't a gimmick. It was he's a good quarterback and he runs a system. And when it's not there as part of the system, he also has that ability to move around, buy time. And, George Kittle probably was his biggest advocate. I mean, George Kittle caught more touchdown passes in the 8 games that Brock Purdy started in any 8-game stretch in his career. And some of those were when Kittle wasn't even in the progression. And so if you're a wide receiver or a tight end and you're not expecting the ball to come to you, but yet something happens in the course of a play where now you find yourself wide open and you throw your hand up and the ball still comes to you. I mean, that's how playmakers judge a quarterback. And that's why I think Kittle was so gung-ho about Brock Purdy. And I mean, he said it on the record that, that Brock Purdy did enough to win the starting job. And I think everybody around the team sees that. I think Trey Lance sees that. I think everybody understands why, if all things are equal and he's healthy, he'll be the starter when the season starts.